9 दिसंबर 2022 को चाइनीज पीएलए ट्रुप्स ने तवांग सेक्टर के यांगसे एरिया में लाइन ऑफ एक्चुअल कंट्रोल पर अतिक्रमण कर स्टेटस को एक तरफा बदलने का प्रयास किया। चाइना के इस प्रयास का हमारी सेना ने दृढ़ता के साथ सामना किया। सभापति और सदन को यह भी बताना चाहूंगा, इस फेस ऑफ में हाथापाई भी हुई और भारतीय सेना ने बहादुरी से पीएलए को हमारी टेरिटरी में अतिक्रमण करने से रोका और उन्हें उनकी पोस्ट पर वापस जाने के लिए मजबूर कर दिया।
Defence Minister Rajnath Singh on December 13 said that India had raised with China through diplomatic channels the face-off between Indian and Chinese troops in Tawang. Troops of India and China had clashed in Arunachal Pradesh's Tawang sector in the early hours of December 9th, beating each other up with sticks and canes. Speaking at the Lok Sabha, Rajnath Singh said the skirmish at the border had resulted in both sides suffering minor injuries. He added that no Indian soldier was killed or severely injured. So, in light of recent events, Nirupama Subramanian, National Editor, Strategic Affairs of the Indian Express, tells us about the clash that took place in Arunachal Pradesh's Tawang sector and what Defence Minister Rajnath Singh said about it.
In the eastern sector of the LAC, the LAC is nearly 3,500 kilometers long, and the eastern sector comprises of this area in Arunachal and Sikkim, and it's got many forward posts along the LAC. So there at one of these posts in an area, in a contested area called Tawang, on December 9th, in the early hours of December 9th, around 3 o'clock, some 300 odd Chinese soldiers have transgressed into the Indian side, and they have tried to kind of take over the post, the Indian Army post there. They were repulsed by the army detachment that was on the spot. There were, I think, 60 to 80 people, 80 soldiers from the Indian Army. And there was a clash. Both sides were carrying sticks and clubs, and they hit each other. It was hand-to-hand combat with these so-called non-lethal weapons. And there were injuries on both sides. And after a pretty intense round of this combat, which lasted a couple of hours, both sides separated, and the Chinese side went back to their side of the LAC. And so the attempted transgression was effectively repulsed by the Indian side. This happened on the 9th. There were some injuries on the Indian side. Some 40 people got injuries, some minor injuries, like bruises and other kind of wounds because of the beating they received, and some others got fractures. And we are told that on the Chinese side, because there were so many more of them, many more people were injured and suffered fractures. We won't know this for sure until the Chinese side says something about it. He basically confirmed that there had been an incident like this on the 9th of December, and that the PLA troops tried to transgress, and in that area, in what is called the Yangtze area of the Tawang sector, and they unilaterally tried to change the existing arrangement, change the status quo. And our troops, that is the Indian Army soldiers, then fought back. There was a scuffle in which both sides suffered injuries, and the PLA was prevented from actually transgressing into Indian territory. And he also made the point that there were no fatalities or serious casualties on the Indian side. And he said that there was a timely intervention by the Indian military commanders, because of which the PLA soldiers went back to their locations across the LAC. And as a follow-up, the local commanders in the area, they held a flag meeting, and they discussed the incident. The defense minister said that the Chinese side was asked to refrain from such actions and maintain peace and tranquility along the border. And he said that the issue had also been taken up with diplomatic channels with the Chinese side. India-China relations have been tense for now more than 2 years. In 2020, after they tried to, after they transgressed into to the Indian side of the LAC in eastern Ladakh, there was a standoff. It was followed by the clash at Galwan, which resulted in the deaths of 20 soldiers. Which, I mean, this was the first time there had been fatalities in India-China sort of encounters at the LAC in a very long time. And it was a serious issue. Both sides were talking at several levels. They were talking at the military commanders level locally. They were talking through diplomatic channels, and also politically. There was some contact between the foreign ministers, the defense ministers. But the situation hasn't got fully resolved. There has been disengagement by Chinese and Indian forces along what are known as friction points in eastern Ladakh. There were 5 such identified friction points, but there are concerns that the Chinese side is building up along the Depsang plains, that there have been other encroachments in the transgressions into the Demchok area. So the relationship really has not recovered since 2020, and it has not gone back to what it was before April 2020, when these incidents took place in eastern Ladakh. And at a time that the Indian side is saying that peace and tranquility along the border is an absolute essential requirement in order to normalize the relationship. Now you have the Chinese attempt to shift the focus to another part of the LAC in the eastern sector. So I mean, this is ratcheting up the tension again. The fact that there were no serious injuries is a blessing. It's very fortunate that there was nothing. Otherwise, as we saw after the Galwan incident, relations between India and China really sank to an all-time low. And as I said, they haven't recovered from that since. The two sides have not had talks at the highest level. There was a meeting between President Xi Jinping and Prime Minister Narendra Modi at the Bali summit, the G20 summit in Bali in November, but they did not speak to each other in any substantive way. They just exchanged pleasantries, as they exchanged courtesies, as the Ministry of External Affairs put it. So there hasn't been any substantive political level engagement between the two sides in a very long time, and the tensions have continued. And as well, you have to remember, because of this, that when the Indian and the US militaries held a joint exercise just a few days ago in Auli at Uttarakhand, the Chinese had objected to that. They had said that this is a violation of the border agreements between India in 1993 and 1996, and that it violates those agreements. But the Indian side has said all through these last 3 years that the Chinese have torn up those agreements in a manner of speaking by actually carrying out those transgressions in Eastern Ladakh. So this incident, what I was trying to say is that incident comes soon after the Chinese expressed their objection to that joint military exercise between the US and India called Operation Yudh Abhyas.